know there ain't no stopping us. Fly without boarding pass. Couldn't catch me, I'll be moving fast. Call me a shooting star. Let 'em know who you are. Flying up in a bar. Wish on a star. Time to show 'em who's in charge. Call me a shooting star. Didn't even get to cross. I said I'm moving too far. Get to glass. Looking at a shooting star. Got more than a couple of people going mad. I swear they're rooting hard. Tell them I be big in the game like she went and got them breast implants. I said I'm moving too fast, didn't even get a glance. I'm ready to eat up track like I'm seated in a restaurant. Yeah. If you had swag like mine, you know it's best to flaunt. Yeah. We aren't hating because you aren't shining like it's neon, not like Kings of Leon. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I'll just have to leave. Shooting stars across the galaxy. I stand out, so don't be mad at me. Infiltrate, I'm with my strategy. When I turn up, then I'll just have to leave. Yeah, shoot. Yeah, shoot.
Is, I'm using the built-in microphone for 1 second because it seems like my Yeti microphone isn't working. So let me try to go into the sound preferences because I know this internal microphone's not so great. So let's go back here, Yeti. Let's see if this will work now. Okay, is it working now? It is. No, it's built in. Let me check the Yeti again. Is that working? Okay, it's working now. Very, very odd. Janice, let me know if you can hear me now. I had to do some adjustments with my microphone and everything. That was very, very strange. But I do move this computer around, so it's not like a permanent setup. So let me know how things are going now. And yeah, otherwise we'll move forward. I haven't done one of these in a while. I like to do a little intro for those of you who don't know. Women kind of are familiar with this with YouTube, but a GWRM is a get ready. No, I did it. GR. I have dyslexia, so forget it. GRWM. Get ready with me. So I always have some clips, put up and, are ready. Sometimes I don't even know what I've queued up, and I'm getting ready to go out into storage, into the world to do some work at the historical archived, so I'm not going to get too dolled up, but I wanted to put on a little bit of makeup and discuss some politics. So that's what we'll do. Play some clips. I put on my makeup and we talk. And I know there's a lot of guys who actually like the makeup part, even though they don't want to admit it. So let's go to my first clip. I believe this is almost all Dave Smith and Michael Malice. And of course, I always have to throw in a little bit of Ben Shapiro. And as usual, I don't like playing clips where it's all, yes, queen, yes. I like playing clips that I disagree with. So I think some people might get the false impression from the clips I play that I disagree with Dave Smith all the time. I do not. I just like playing the clips in which I disagree because that's more interesting rather than, a mutual circle jerk. So let's see what I potentially queued up that maybe I don't agree with.
But I do think that there is this this reactionary impulse in right-wing America, and that at times it's helpful and good because often what they're reacting against is the cathedral, and thank God there are some people who are reactionary and opposed to the kind of ruling elite. But what happens now is that the narrative, it's not as if the narrative from the corporate press is that we can't criticize cops. That is certainly not the narrative. They're not, it's actually, it's a trickier narrative than that, because it's not as if their narrative is we support the state and the enforcement arm of the state. The narrative from the corporate press, which is more sophisticated than that, that's what you would get out of a North Korean regime or something like that with state media. What you get out of our corporate press is a far more sophisticated narrative, which is that you can criticize cops all day long, however, only on racial grounds. Yeah. That is the only appropriate criticism of cops, is just that they're racist. And what's brilliant about this narrative is that it keeps the population fighting each other and not uniting against the cops. It's actually a great protector of the police state in many ways, because it's like, oh no, now we let the plebs argue about racism rather than say, oh, we're also going to show videos of the cops killing these white people and make those big stories, and then be like, oh look, they do it to black people, they do it to white people. Hey, what's the common denominator here? Kind of seems like it's a cops versus citizens issue, and there's a lot more citizens than there are cops. So they very carefully control that, and what happens is that the right-wingers who are reactionary, they see this and they go, well, no, it's bullshit. This kid was a thug. Yeah. So now I'm reacting against the corporate press, but you're doing it in the way that they want. Just like Curtis Yarvin was saying, they want you to be a Nazi. Like, that's the perfect, look, was the corporate press upset that Charlottesville happened? No, they were thrilled. Joe Biden was running on that as of last year. It was like, perfect. That's the perfect way to paint the other side. See, they're just what we told you. And so you're falling into their hands, I think, a lot more than meaningfully resisting them.
Let me know. Okay, the mic is going on again. I have to put it on mute while while the clips are playing. And I want to queue up a few other things, but right now I'm just getting my foundation on. And I actually would like to interact with Carolyn's comments, because I thought that was really interesting. But I'm trying to get my mouse. I've got a lot of screens, and I want to put it up on the screen. There we go. It's up on the screen. So Carolyn says, I'm a woman that does not want to, I don't got my glasses on, I'm old, and I don't want to mess it up, that does not want to watch you put on makeup. I don't use makeup. I think the boudoir detracts from the seriousness of your opinions. I am HO. Well, I do appreciate your opinion, though I disagree with it. I think there's something for everyone. Those in the YouTube, who watch a lot of YouTube videos, know that this is kind of a genre that's taken off. One of the biggest YouTube channels right now is Monday Murder, Mystery, and Makeup with Bailey Sarian. She's so awesome, and she's such a beauty. And I find that really interesting. But not everyone's content is going to be for everyone. So you want to know who I make my content for? Me. If I like my content, I'm happy with it. If other people happen to like it, that's great. but I don't make it to please other people. And I think we do more success in life because if it's something I don't like doing, then it just won't get done. So while I appreciate that, Carolyn, you could probably just listen to the sound and get the content if you like the content. But otherwise, this particular show, which is just one of many I do, might not be the right one for you. I'm not a big makeup person myself, but I do enjoy it every once in a while. And I just find it kind of funny because this is, I believe, the only political Get Ready With Me. And I just got a kick out of that because there are so many of these crime shows that are Get Ready With Me, which to me, I don't know. I found that juxtaposition weird, like talking about these terrible killers and Bailey's just making herself gorgeous. Well, she was gorgeous before makeup. So I just found that like kind of weird. So I'm like, what would be even weirder? Talking politics while putting on your makeup. So that's why I do it. And I've just found that some of the guys do secretly like watching it, not because they want to learn how to put on makeup. I think they're fascinated by some of the rituals their wives go through. And I explain some of the things and they find it interesting. Like the amount of work we go through, such as I had to put on my primer and now I'm putting on my foundation before we can even start anything. So I hope you can put up with the makeup part, Carolyn, but I do super appreciate your opinion. Now, going on to what Dave Smith said, I know sometimes when I do these clips, they're a bit jumpy because I did pull them out of a larger context. But I found what he said so fascinating, and actually I agree with him here, is the way we're being manipulated. Like, we're talking about police brutality, but we're not really talking about police brutality. The corporate media has turned us against each other. So they highlight only certain police brutality and then make the people of the demographic that they're not highlighting get defensive, make them then attack the demographic they are highlighting without realizing this is friendly fire, folks. You two are on the same side, the corporate media, and the police state is the enemy. We see this a lot with Ben Shapiro, who just feels these knee-jerk, need to tell us what bad people these victims are, as if you have to be a perfect victim. And I love the way Dave put it. Oh, they don't want us to say, oh, here they are brutalizing this black guy, and equally here they are brutalizing this white guy. What's the common denominator here? Police brutality, which occurs against everybody. Now, I am not going to say, and a lot of libertarians will disagree with me here, to the person being brutalized, it's equal. Like, person being brutalized, there's like, it doesn't make a damn difference what color your skin is when you're the person brutalized. Your life is your life. But if we're going to pull back into a socio-political context, there is a different context in the wider history of this country to a black person being brutalized. And they know it, and we'll be stupid if we don't recognize that and try to pretend as if history is colorblind. We personally can be. We can try to move towards that society, but we are not there yet. I'm listening to a book right now called The Adult's Guide to Drug Use, and it's from this doctor who studies drugs. As a scientist, the government gives them drugs to give to people and study. And he finally came out of the closet as an unashamed drug user himself. And he's advocating for the normalization of healthy drug use. But I'm going to do a whole other show on that because I happen to agree with him. But he talked about how he's treated differently when they go places with his white colleagues because he's a black guy with dreadlocks. I'm sorry, if you're a white person and do not realize that there is still disparate treatment, I just have to ask you to open your eyes. This doesn't require you to become some kind of social justice warrior. It does not require you to hate yourself because you're white and be less white and all that bullshit. To recognize there are some differences. So there is a cultural difference to a black person being brutalized by the police. Now, I just wanted to get that out of the way to now back up to agree with his point. White people are getting brutalized by the police as well, and that sucks, okay? And the fact that that's not being highlighted is a problem. But as white people who might be upset that that's not being highlighted, don't blame black people for wanting to have attention to things happening in their own community and act like it's robbing you of something. Blame the corporate media who's not giving equal attention. So in order to give some attention, because there's one case of brutality against a white man that I think is going to haunt me for the rest of my life, and I don't think it's gotten nearly enough attention. And I didn't queue it up, but I do have it downloaded, and I'd like to play it and perhaps talk about it. But trigger warning if we use those. Let's just say, if you this is going to be the Daniel Schaefer incident. If you finally were able to get that out of your head and not have nightmares about it, you might not want to watch for a little bit, because I'm going to play it. If you're okay with seeing it again, then cool. Why? I can't find my mouse. You know when you have two screens and you lose your mouse? Okay, here we go. So I just got to find where I saved this on my computer. I didn't have time to save it ahead of time. Is it in movies? Yes. Okay, 4K downloader. Mesa, please. Okay, here we go.
Stop right there! Stop! Stop! Get on the ground, both of you! Lay down on the ground! Lay down on the ground! Who else is in the room?
Nobody.
Nobody else is in the room?
Nobody.
Are you positive?
Nobody. Absolutely positive.
Okay. Okay, young man, listen to my instructions and do not make a mistake. You are to keep your legs crossed.
Okay, I wanted to stop it for a second because I do want to provide some commentary, because most of us have seen this, uninterrupted. First of all, God, please don't let me die on ugly hotel carpet. I can't go into a hotel. Every time I go into a hotel, all I think about is this. Because the visual aesthetics of this whole thing are just so ordinary, and then the most unordinary, horrible thing happens. The juxtaposition just really disturbs me. But the power trip of this man, holding this deadly weapon on this guy, and the way he's talking to him, like he's an animal.
You understand me?
Yes, sir.
You are to put both of your hands palms down, straight out in front of you. Push yourself up to a kneeling position. I said keep your legs crossed!
I'm sorry.
I didn't say this in conversation. Put your hair! Hands up in the air! You do that again, we're shooting you. Do you understand?
Please do not shoot me.
Then listen to my instructions.
I'm trying to just do what you
Don't talk! Listen! Hands straight up in the air. Do not...
Okay, this poor guy's terrified. And this guy he's getting off on this power. I mean, am I the only one who feels that way, who sees this? It's almost like a perverse, murderous game of Simon Says. And you fuck up, you die.
Put your hands down for any reason. You think you're going to fall, you better fall on your face. Your hands go back in the small of your back or down. We are going to shoot you. Do you understand me?
Yes, sir.
Crawl towards me. Crawl towards me!
How demeaning. I have you on your knees, begging for your life, basically, terrified to make a wrong move. And crawl, you miserable worm, crawl towards me for your miserable life. That's what I hear. I'm so repulsed.
Yes, sir.
Don't talk!
That's actually not the clip I wanted, but I couldn't download the one I wanted, though I'm glad it was this one. I actually wanted to find the one of him actually shooting because the horror of it. But then again, I might not even be able to continue this show if I did that. I'm already choking up. Awful. But I did pull up another clip that I haven't seen. Though almost in honor of him, I feel like I should have showed really the actual brutality of it where he got shot. It was just ridiculous. But I haven't. I have one of his wife after this. I haven't watched this. I just figured it's 2 minutes. Let's cue it up. I'm curious. And you know, and that cop's living his best life now, you know.
Last week we showed you graphic video of a controversial 2016 police shooting. The Mesa, Arizona officer was fired for violating police procedures, but acquitted last week of charges he murdered 26-year-old Daniel Shaver of Texas. Today, Shaver's widow talked to Adriana Diaz.
It took people watching my husband die, a very horrible, inhumane death, for people to care.
Please do not shoot me.
Then listen to my instructions!
I'm trying to just do what you...
Don't talk! Listen!
For 2 years, this video of Daniel Shaver's last moments was sealed from the public.
Don't talk!
It was an execution. You had a man begging for his life, and he was shot 5 times for what? For his elbow coming up too high? For being confused? For being compliant? Why did he deserve to die? He didn't.
The video was released last Thursday after jurors found Officer Philip Brailsford not guilty.
Just don't understand how anybody could watch that video and then say not guilty, that this is justified, that Daniel deserved this, and that Philip Brailsford doesn't deserve to be held accountable for his actions.
What do you make of him saying he had a split second to decide what to do when he thought your husband was pulling a gun?
I think that this goes back to the Mesa Police Department's training, if this is really how they're trained.
Shaver had no gun on him, but police found 2 pellet rifles he used for his pest control job in his hotel room. Sweet said the hardest day of her life was telling her daughters their father wasn't coming home. Yesterday, she received a phone call from her 8-year-old school.
She tried choking herself while she was at school and told her friend that she wanted to die. So I spent all last evening with her in the hospital, getting her psychiatric help.
What did Natalie say to you when you saw her?
She told me that she wanted to be with her dad.
Sweet says important information was not included in the trial, like the former officer's past record of excessive force. She has filed a wrongful death civil suit and is calling on the Department of Justice to investigate. Jeff?
Adriana Diaz tonight. Thank you, Adriana.
Here we go. Woof. That got me. So, yeah, it happens to all of us, but the corporate media really plays up one angle over the other. And, yeah, and Janice, if you've seen the full video, I mean, it's literally right when they cut off in that one video and put the thing that says he was shot 5 times. Like, it was literally right after that. That's all that guy did to provoke him. So Dave Smith has it right. What is the common denominator? And am I outraged that more outrage wasn't shown over this? Yeah, I am. I'm outraged. But I don't blame the black community. Their outrage, it's not like there's a limited pie of outrage, and the outrage over George Floyd is taking away from the outrage pie for Daniel Shaver. So we need to remember that and not make other victims of police brutality and of our police state and the fact that the war against drugs is a war against us. Turn on each other. Remember what Dave said. The common denominator is the police. The common denominator is our policies, is the laws. Don't be worried, trying to find the perfect victim in the Black community and being mad at them because they're getting the attention. Let me reverse it upon you a little bit. A lot of white people get very upset about this whole idea of quote unquote white privilege. And I get it, because what's called our privilege is what just everybody should get. I really don't think it should be framed as white privilege. I think it should be framed as minority disadvantage, to show it's not that we're getting something extra, it's that they're getting something less. And they should be getting what everyone is getting. You shouldn't feel bad for getting what human beings should get. And that's the way this narrative is painted. Like, we should feel guilty for being treated decently. So yeah, we shouldn't turn it around and claim they're getting coverage privilege for their victims being given more attention, rather than being mad at them for having that quote unquote privilege. We should realize it's not a privilege. That's the type of attention that should be happening for any person murdered by the police. And I don't care that cop got off. No, he murdered that guy. He murdered him. Simple as that. Perhaps, if, I'm not in favor of riots, but listen, when cops get off for things like that, do you blame? I mean, there's something that my pastor used to say about things that happen in life. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. And I think a little bit of that could go a long way in trying to understand the pain of other communities. Okay, I got to find where I left off. There's the first one. Is that the first clip I played?
Last week, we showed you graphic video of a controversial 2016 police shooting.
That's it.
There is, and it all kind of stems from the way I talk about immigration and some other issues too, but there is this kind of like autistic brand of ANCAPs who think that
Aspergo capitalism is what it's called.
Yes, it's they're good people. I like them. Those are my people.
Good people.
They are phenomenal people. But that seem to think that it's almost like, just because you advocate the abolition of the state, and because you believe in like private property and the non-aggression principle, that I therefore, in a statist world, cannot pick between two bad options and the state doing anything. And I try to explain to these people where you're like, well, look, so if you're like, I used to live in the Upper West Side, a very nice neighborhood, pricey neighborhood, a lot of families, kind of quiet for New York City. If the streets are covered in homeless people. It's been worse this year than ever, but it's been a problem for a while. People were complaining about it when I lived there pre-COVID, for a while. Homeless people all over the streets. Now, I have absolutely no problem with the police making them leave. Like, I have no problem with that. Now, you could make some libertarian argument and go, but they're nonviolent and they're just standing there and this is a man with a gun coming in and making them leave. And you're like, okay, yes, but look, if they didn't rob all of us to force us to pay for these roads, to pay for these parks, and then build them there, the libertarian position isn't none of these would exist. The libertarian position is that we would voluntarily pay for it on our own. There would still be roads and streets and parks. And in that scenario, what do you think the odds are that we would allow homeless people to just hang out here? So you can say that, like, we want the state to do nothing, right? But when the state robs you, creates these parks, builds these roads, and then allows homeless people on them, that's still doing something. Like, that's also doing something, claiming a monopoly on your security force and then not securing anything. And if I have to choose between a homeless person being, forced to leave, or my daughter seeing people pissing and shooting up heroin on her walk to school, I choose them being told to leave. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing contradicting being a libertarian anarchist about that. It's just, out of two bad situations, I like this one better than that one.
Yeah, if the state seizes for itself the duty or the right or the obligation, whatever you call it, to provide security and prevents individuals from privately implementing that, I would rather they actually did it in as peaceable a manner as possible than that they proclaim themselves this right and then not do it. I mean, I mean, here's an example. Like, we do not want government producing food because we know that's going to lead to famine. But if the government seized all the farms, I would much rather them try to be as productive as possible than say, yeah, we're not going to do anything. So the problem is whenever they try to do anything, it always ends up with distortions. And what those distortions mean when it comes to security is extreme violence, innocent people being killed, murderous people not being convicted, so on and so forth. But yeah, the other thing is people seem to have a very and I see this with Twitter and my polls all the time. People seem to have a very difficult capacity to make ranked choices. And it's just like, these all suck. And it's like, listen, if you're an anarchist and someone said, here are 10 government programs, which do you want to get rid of first? And you're like, all of them, they all suck. I find that to be a position I have very little respect for. Because if the choices are between the ATF and food stamps, yeah, I would prefer food stamps are private. I think it encourages people to have unhealthy eating habits. I remember I was in the supermarket and someone behind me was paying with food stamps and she was buying Oreos. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, the whole point of food stamps is that you're not starving. It's not that you're eating like sugary lard. And you know perfectly well, Nabisco has their lobbyists who are saying, look, you know, it's not fair that people who are, food insecure don't have access to dessert. And that congressman's like, yeah, I'm going to make sure Oreos are on this list of things you could buy in food stamps.
Okay. Well, first, I'm probably going to play that clip back and stop it. I wanted to play it in full. I wanted to play it in full first. Because I think there's so many misunderstandings there. But first, for this, what is it? NYX makeup for drugstore makeup, it's cheap as hell. It's as good as some of the most expensive stuff I got. This is one of the best eyeshadow primers. NYX Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Highly recommend it. These brushes, I don't even remember. I think I got them on Wish. Perfect for the curve. See how it's got that like little curve in it? Perfect for cheeks. And I just wanted to be sure I showed you guys that. Okay. Now, you might be wondering, what's the larger context of this disagreement I have with Dave here? It's on the issue of no particular orderism. I've done a lot on no particular orderism, so I'm not going to go into it all here. When I chop this up and re-release it, I'll put a card up that has the link to the big explanation I did about my disagreement with Dave on no particular orderism. But I think there's a confusion here. They, I think, keep confusing having a preference. Everyone has preferences in what order they would like to see the state dismantled. I don't think I hate saying any because there's always some nuts out there. So when I say any, I mean reasonable, like the vast majority of anarchists or libertarians don't have a preference. And I don't think any of them demonize having a preference. But he then says something very reasonable like that and then kind of conjoins it with the rest of his issues of what the police should be doing now or what the state should be doing now. And I think here I'm stumbling over myself a little bit, that it confuses the issue. And it might not be entirely clear. So I would like to replay that clip, and I'm going to start and stop it and provide commentary. I just wanted it to be in context first, but let's go back to
there is, and it all kind of stems from the way I talk about immigration and some other issues too. But
okay, the reason why I know he's kind of connecting these issues, even though in this short clip it seems like he might not be, is because he mentioned the way he deals with immigration. His position on immigration is that we cannot open the borders until we first dismantle the welfare state. I totally get into how I disagree with that in the card that I just put up. But that's not the same thing as what he's addressing here, and he just conflated the two. The whole immigration thing, and a lot of libertarians agree with him, that we can't open the borders till we dismantle the welfare state. I call that Stockholm libertarianism, because each side of this issue has a hostage, the welfare state and the borders, and neither of them are going to release their hostage. So you have a game of chicken in which no one's going to blink, and they both get to evade responsibility by blaming it on the other person. Nice work if you can get it. I don't think that's effective libertarianism. But that's not what we're dealing with here, okay? So let's continue.
There is this kind of like autistic brand of ANCAPs who think that
Aspergo capitalism is what.
And I'm an Aspergo capitalist, guilty as charged. I have autism, so okay. I think it is a lot of us. I think it's even a little bit of you and Michael Malice too, Dave. Don't put yourself above it. But anyway, autists of the world unite. Proud anarcho. What do you say? Whatever. I already forgot it. Aspergo anarcho, or it said whatever. Doesn't matter. It was a joke. Let's continue.
Yes, it's they're good people. I like them. Those are my people.
Good people.
They are phenomenal people. But that seem to think that it's almost like just because you advocate the abolition of the state and because you believe in like private property and the non-aggression principle, that I therefore in a statist world cannot pick between two bad options and the state doing anything.
Okay, that's where I think he's just mischaracterized the argument that his opponents have with him. Nobody is saying in a statist world, or at least nobody reasonable, again, Aspergo capitalist, yeah, that's definitely me. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, if you're wondering why I'm looking from here to here, I have a little comment screen here. Nobody is saying that when you're stuck in a statist world and things are happening, that you're to just throw up your hands, make yourself a victim, and saying, because I don't believe in the state, in the perfect utopia, that I don't think the state should do anything now. Nobody is saying that. That's a straw man. Everybody has a preference. Now, some libertarians might be a little bit more autistic than others and kind of judge you a bit more for picking a solution, but everybody realizes that. We all have to do it. We're all using resources. The roads are paid for by stolen money. Does that mean we don't drive? You know, libertarianism is not a suicide pact in a statist world. So let's continue, because I think he has strawmanned a bit here.
Try to explain to these people where you're like, well, look, if you're like, I used to live in the Upper West Side, a very nice neighborhood, pricey neighborhood, a lot of families, kind of quiet for New York City. If the streets are covered in homeless people, it's been worse this year than ever, but it's been a problem for a while.
Okay, well, first I want to explain to you guys. I always use guides for my eyeshadow. I have been blessed with both severely hooded and somewhat downturned eyes. Makes it so difficult to get decent shadow that looks good once you open your eyes. You do it with your eyes shut. It looks wonderful. When you have hooded eyes and downturned eyes, you open it and all of a sudden it goes. So that's why I use guides. Now he's talking about a homeless problem in a Tony neighborhood that he used to live in. Homeless people were on the public, they were in tents in the public area. And that raises a whole question, a libertarian question. Is that okay? Because, public property shouldn't, there should be no such thing as public property, but they're citizens of the country. Can they just stick their tent there? What are the rights of the property owners around this public property for this nuisance that is happening around them? It's very complex. I agree. But he didn't say there should be absolutely no such thing as public property. I don't actually believe that as an anarchist, believe it or not. I think going way back into the clouds of time, I agree with Roderick Long on this, that there is something of a public right of way, that you have to be able to travel. So there are public lanes and things like that, but those are meant for travel, not for pitching tents. So it's somewhat irrelevant here. I just wanted to bring that up to open one's mind to that idea. And that's why you can't encircle somebody in their property, the whole donut problem. But here, with these public, maybe parks, larger areas, the homeless people have just as much a right to use it as the people in the property around. So where are the limits? What can be imposed? This just raises the whole problem with having public property, because you are in some way then going to have to limit its use by people who, as members of the quote-unquote public, have just as much right to it. He later will go on to argue that he guesses the homeowners have paid more into the theft pool, in which the public areas are paid for, so he thinks they have a greater right. I don't know how he gets to that conclusion, because A, he doesn't know what kind of taxes these homeless people may have paid earlier in their lives. He doesn't know what kind of inheritance that they may have been robbed of from wealthier parents that paid into it, that could have passed that wealth down to them, so that there's all kinds of ways that everyone can have rights to this area. It's not simply the taxes you are paying today. The question becomes, what can or cannot be limited? I think we all can agree that aggression in those public areas should not be allowed. But he's starting off not with aggression. He's starting off with things like eyesores. I do not want to see these tents in my Tony neighborhood. But is that legitimate from a libertarian point of view? Does he have a right to that? Does he have a right to ask the force of the state to remove those tents? Are they aggressing? So here's the whole question here. But I don't think anybody denies that we should be having these discussions. And if it were, in fact, aggression, since the state has appropriated for itself the right to your self-defense, that it's wrong to call the state. But let's continue. Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse here a second.
Were complaining about it when I lived there pre-COVID, for a while. Homeless people all over the streets. Now, I have absolutely no problem with the police making them leave. Like, I have no problem.
You have no problem with that, really? Okay, why? On what grounds? If they're just there. So far, he hasn't mentioned any aggression. And so he has no problem. Now, I have a problem with that. I have a problem with him having no problem with that, because I haven't yet heard the libertarian grounds for removing them. And every interaction with the police, as we just so graphically saw, is a potential for violence, particularly with people who are viewed as less than, which the homeless often are. And the homeless often, might have some psychological problems that could cause a misunderstanding with the police. Now, of course, some might say, well, that's exactly why they should be removed from my neighborhood. I don't want these, people with perhaps mental issues in my neighborhood. But do they lose rights to exist? Your neighbors might be more mentally your neighbors with lots of money living in a beautiful mansion could have more psychological problems and be a bigger danger to you. And answer Carolyn asks, who are these? The dark-haired gentleman is Dave Smith of Part of the Problem, and the lighter-haired gentleman is Michael Malice, who is his guest often. And the show, I think, was entitled The Malice of the State. I adore both of these people. Michael Malice is like shit poster extraordinaire. But let's continue.
That. Now, you could make some libertarian argument and go, but they're nonviolent and they're just standing there, and this is a man with a gun coming in and making them leave. And you're like, okay, yes, but look, if they did...
Okay, yes, but That is a libertarian argument. There's a man with a gun telling them to leave and they're just standing there. Okay, let's see how you're going to justify this, Dave.
Rob all of us, to force us to pay for these roads, to pay for these parks, and then build them there. The libertarian position isn't none of these would exist. The libertarian position is that we would voluntarily pay for it on our own. There would still be roads and streets and parks. And in that scenario, what do you think the odds are that we would allow homeless people to just hang out here?
But that's different. Just because there would be an analog to having parks and things like that, and what would those look like, because they'd be owned in a different way, is somewhat irrelevant to what they are now, because it's an analog. It's not exactly the same. And when you say this we, Dave, who is this we you're talking about? Because you and I are both libertarians, and I've already disagreed with you thinking it's perfectly okay to ask the cops to come to just take a peaceful homeless person out. So obviously we do not agree. And if you're saying, if I were your neighbor and we've both equally paid into this property, if you can somehow prove that, who wins? It's the whole same thing argument with the border. Why, if I want to hire somebody from Mexico, why are you telling me I can't? So it's kind of the same thing here. He just made a generalization, like, obviously, we all, like, none of us would. No, you don't know that. And you can't make apples to apples here.
So you can say that, like, we want the state to do nothing, right? But when the state robs you, creates these parks, builds these roads, and then allows homeless people on them.
Okay. This is where it gets into straw man territory. Because he's kind of like equivocating, and here I'm putting in my wing using the guides, because otherwise, with my my hooded eyes, I wouldn't be able to do this. And yes, I know some people are going to start reeing because I'm using a Jeffree Star palette, blood sugar. I know Jeffree Star's very questionable human being right now, but this is already paid for. I am not so stupid to think that throwing this in the garbage as some kind of protest against Jeffree Star being a shitty human being is going to do a damn thing socially. I'm going to use the pretty makeup. Plus, he makes good makeup. Sorry. Not sorry. So, I'm going to use it. I've had this for a while. Okay, so let's continue.
That's still doing something. Like, that's also doing something, claiming a monopoly on your security force and then not securing anything. And if I have to choose between a homeless person being, forced to leave, or my daughter seeing people pissing and shooting up heroin on her.
Okay, that was a jump, wasn't it? He went from homeless people living in tents to homeless people pissing and shooting up heroin. Now, pissing out in the open and all over the place because of the potential public health hazard, that could be considered aggression. I wouldn't have a problem with stopping them from doing that. But of course, what we don't understand here, or it's not coming into play here, I don't know his neighborhood. I don't know if there's nearby businesses. But a lot of times, homeless people are forced to do that because no one will let them in to use bathrooms in businesses. Because we have no fucking compassion. Homeless people shooting up heroin. Are they all doing this? I don't know if they are. Are they doing it out openly on the streets? I don't know. That turns somewhat into a gray area, to be honest with you, as from a libertarian. In the world we live in now, obviously that's illegal, so he can call the cops on that. He obviously, like me, doesn't believe that using heroin should be illegal. So what is then the big think of the children? I don't want my daughter to see this. if in Libertopia, Dave, heroin would be legal? Do you similarly shield your daughter's eyes from somebody drinking beer? Like, I'm not saying there isn't potentially an argument to be made here that there is a qualitative difference, that you don't want your daughter to see this rather than that. There's lots of things, if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her to see. It doesn't entitle me to call the cops on them. It puts a greater responsibility upon me, maybe to explain to my daughter, or make some kind of arrangements where she wouldn't see these things. You know, get her in the car, make sure the windows are up, distract her with something else. But just because you don't want your daughter to see something doesn't give you the right to use aggression against somebody. I'm waiting to see your argument for how the homeless person is an aggressor. They certainly are breaking the law if they're shooting up heroin. But I want to hear the libertarian argument for them being an aggressor against your daughter, to the fact that you can send someone with a gun to remove them. I just don't see that yet. I think what we do see is the problem of public property. And I would say, actually, you might be impeding moving towards a more libertarian solution of public property by artificially diminishing the problem by using illegitimate force to hide it.
Walk to school, I choose them being told to leave. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing contradicting being a libertarian anarchist about that. It's just, out of two bad situations, I like this one better than that one.
Yeah, if the state...
Again, here's the equivocation. It isn't merely two bad situations. It's you using state aggression against a homeless person for doing something that you haven't yet proved is aggression, that you just don't personally like. Sorry, that's not a bad situation in a libertarian justification. Really? Your daughter seeing something you don't like justifies potentially killing a homeless person. Because remember, all laws are enforced. The minute you call the police on somebody, you should be okay with, if things get out of control, them dying for that. You're okay with that? I don't think this is two bad situations in a libertarian context. If it were two equally bad situations in a libertarian context, I do agree. There's nothing unlibertarian by choosing one that you prefer. Everyone has preferences. But you need to make sure you're not being an aggressor at the same time. And I'm not convinced yet, in this scenario, Dave, if you call the police on those homeless people, that you're not being an aggressor.
Seizes for itself the duty or the right or the obligation, whatever you call it, to provide security, and prevents individuals from privately implementing that, I would rather they actually did it in as peaceable a manner as possible, than that they proclaim themselves this right and then not do it. I mean, I mean, here's an example. Like, Okay,
let's stop there. I agree with Michael Malice, but what they're presuming here in this discussion is that there was an aggression occurring. And if there's an aggression occurring, then obviously, since we can't defend our rights ourselves, the police have taken that right to themselves. We would prefer that they do it well, obviously. But that just presumes in this whole context here that there was a right to call the police, and I don't think that's been demonstrated yet.
Not want government producing food, because we know that's going to lead to famine. But if the government seized all the farms, I would much rather them try to be as productive as possible than say, yeah, we're not going to do anything. So the problem is, whenever they try to do anything, it always ends up with distortions. And what those distortions mean when it comes to security is extreme violence, innocent people being killed, murderous people not being convicted, so on and so forth.
And I see there's some comments coming by on this. I will get to them. I just want to finish through this I'm not so sure I picked the right colors. I kind of do this at random. I'm going with like a purple and orange here, and I'm going to splash in some pink. Again, the assumption was made that an actual aggression has occurred. And again, needs to be proven. Has not yet been proven.
The other thing is people seem to have a very and I see this with Twitter and my polls all the time. People seem to have a very difficult capacity to make ranked choices. And it's just like, these all suck. And it's like, listen, if you're an anarchist and someone said, here are 10 government programs, which do you want to get rid of first? And you're like, all of them, they all suck. I find that to be a position I have very little respect for.
And I agree with him there. I saw this happen in the hypothetical polls of if you had no choice, or your choice was, if you don't make a choice, you're going to get shot in the head, something really ridiculous, would you have voted for Biden or Trump? And then you have the libertarians who just want to virtue signal and go, neither. Really? You die for that? Okay. I think it's an interesting discussion to have. If you had to pick one or the other, what would you pick and why? The people who just stubbornly just refuse to answer that question is just bizarre to me.
Because if the choices are between the ATF and food stamps, I would prefer food stamps are private. I think it encourages people to have unhealthy eating habits. I remember I was in the supermarket.
Okay. So he had said, if the choice is between the ATF, getting rid of the ATF or getting rid of food stamps, I'd get rid of the ATF. I think everybody would say that. But here's the thing in life. It's not coming out so bad now that I just need to blend it, I think. Rarely do we have such choices. The way life works is through a confluence of circumstances, an opportunity presents itself to get rid of something. It might not be something you think is even terribly important. I mean, it's part of the state. If you had your fantasy way of ordering it, it would be way down there in your list of priorities, but that is irrelevant because the opportunity is now to get rid of it. You don't pass up that opportunity because you'd rather do something first when that other thing you'd rather do first isn't even on the table. So the choice ends up being get rid of this or don't get rid of anything. That is where they're conflating things. Obviously, if I had a choice, get rid of the ATF or get rid of food stamps, I'd get rid of the ATF. But what if the choice was, we have an opportunity to get rid of food stamps. Do we do it or not? And if you start hemming and hawing, saying there are more important things to get rid of, but they're not on the table, the only thing that's on the table to get rid of right now is that is where no particular orderism comes in. You don't hold one positive reform hostage to another. Because he talked about distortion of the market. And the funny thing is, in calling the police against people, non-aggressive people, in order to remove an eyesore, something you'd rather your daughter not seeing, you are distorting the situation by hiding it. When in fact, forcing it out into the open, letting everyone see there's really nothing you can do about it, might bring about change faster than if you distorted it by using force where it was inappropriate.
And someone behind me was paying with food stamps and she was buying Oreos. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, the whole point of food stamps is that you're not starving. It's not that you're eating like sugary lard. And perfectly well, Nabisco has their lobbyists who are saying, look, it's not fair that people who are, food insecure don't have access to dessert. And that congressman was like, I'm going to make sure Oreos are on this list of things you can.
I'm going to stop there. They did get into an interesting discussion after this that I didn't include on should a libertarian support restrictions on food stamps that say you can only buy it for like actual healthy foods and not Oreos. And Dave made the libertarian argument for both sides. One side being, well, if I've got to pay for their health care, then I have the right to say they should only use this money, which is stolen from me, to buy healthy foods. I don't think that argument has any merit. Just because in a different area you're paying for something, and just because the government has stolen from you to provide funds for food, does not give you the right to be daddy to these people. And you shouldn't be asking the state to do it either, because ultimately everyone's paying for something for you, in which your freedom choices might be causing to be more expensive, and you don't want them using that logic against you either. I do not think it's particularly libertarian to say it can only be used for certain things because it might cost me more elsewhere. Dave, you having children is costing the people in your neighborhood who are getting taxed more, because they have to pay for it through their property taxes and they don't have any children. So does that mean then it'd be okay that you have to get permission from all your neighbors to have children? I mean, we like to think that our choices aren't costing other people money because we're not on welfare, or not obviously on welfare. Let me tell you something, dear libertarian. We are all on the government teat. Unwillingly, but we are all sucking off that titty, okay? So be careful before you're looking down on other people, because the government's made it so that we're all helpless in some way, or all dependent in some way. Okay, I want to go to the next clip now that, oh no, I wanted to look at comments. I gotta find my glasses and then go to the next clip. So I've got to get my little thing here. Michelle, just on the Jeffree Star thing, says that I have 3 of his palettes. I think I have 2 of his palettes. They are high quality, so I use it. And you want to know what? I don't know half of that controversy. And the things that have to do with victimizing other people, and his back and forth over Dobby Vanity, where Dobby Vanity was, exploiting young children, that I obviously care about. The other things like that's going on in his life, with the battles with him and Shane and Tati, I don't give a shit. Michelle also said, and I'm going to put these on the screen, I am sure there are other more libertarian actions that can be taken to redirect homeless people to another area that doesn't require having to get police involved. Absolutely. I mean, police should be the last resort and save for actual aggression, not inconvenience. Bill says, excellent point. Parents have a responsibility to educate their children. He's almost taken the state as the party line, and also have a responsibility to protect their children. And even though the government has taken the ultimate stance of like protecting, there are still certain protections you can do. Again, if this is something he really believes would be very, very harmful for his daughter to see, there are ways he can prevent his daughter from seeing it that don't involve using state aggression against the homeless. Michelle says, fundraising or other voluntary charitable activity to help them. Anything but preemptively calling the police when no actual crime has been committed. That's exactly it. And if an actual crime is being committed, then the fact that they're homeless is completely irrelevant. It could be anybody. If there's an actual crime being committed, then fine. But when there's not, there's not. See, Bill's given the opposite opinion. I disagree. That in the 70s, the food stamps could only buy certain types of food. I think granting just because we're being stolen from, I don't think we should grant the right to government to tell people what they can eat. I just think that's a dangerous gun that will be used against us. Okay, so going on to the Next one. Let's see. Because I kind of got off order here by doing that twice. So let's go here.
But I think our role is to always be pushing back toward the North Star. You don't want to get lost in these battles and then become Milton Friedman, just spending your whole career pushing for, you know, a negative income tax or school vouchers, and and forgetting that the end goal is to get the government out of all of this, and that would be a much. So you always want to keep promoting anarchy and libertarianism and all of these things, but there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, but short of getting there, I'd prefer this to that, or this is an important, you know, like decision to make within this, the realm of the world we're actually living in.
Okay, I think he thinks that people. One second. Can't talk while I'm doing a little bit of a wing here. And notice I'm doing it on the paper. Again, what he said is perfectly reasonable, but the way he's presenting it is as if anybody would disagree. Maybe a few would, but in general, I don't think I, as a person who generally disagrees with him on a lot of these issues, don't disagree. We always need to be pointing to the North Star. That's something that the National Party needs to learn, because that's been my complaint with the National Party, is they're acting as if these little interim measures are libertarian. They might be on the road to more libertarian solution, to libertarianism, but they are not the end goal in itself. And I don't think anyone disagrees there. Very few libertarians, even though we keep hearing about this boogeyman, are all or nothing. Like, if I can't have anarchy tomorrow, I don't want to have any positive reform. I've never met a person like that, though I keep hearing about them, and I've met a lot of people. Next clip. But I gotta put on my glasses. Oh, let's see here.
There's one argument I've been seeing in the last 48 hours, especially, I mean, on Twitter, but you see it a lot. And sometimes there's an argument that is so absurd that, or like it just doesn't add up, that I start to wonder what I'm missing, because I can't understand how people posit it as a gotcha with a straight face. So one of the arguments against anarchism, and this is not at all a poor argument, I think it's a very strong argument, is, well, if you have an anarchist area, you know, it's going to be immediately invaded by a stronger government just overnight. And when I point out there are many countries on Earth right now, small countries, that do not have a military, why aren't they being invaded? Their argument is, yeah, but they're not being invaded because they're under the protection of bigger countries. And I'm like, okay. But it's just because they're like, well, if you have this anarchist area, it's going to be invaded. Why isn't this one being invaded? Because it's being protected. It's like, why wouldn't this anarchist area be protected as well? Why? Or the idea that it's impossible that it would be protected. And to the point where I genuinely don't understand what they're trying to prove when it's just immediately been demonstrated as false.
Hey, Wayne, shut the door. Are you done? No, I'm not done. What are you invading my space here? Boy, he does this to me all the time. Now, before I move on to the comments there, I wanted to show something in the makeup thing, because I do explain things with hooded eyes, which I don't think people understand. Okay, so if you look right now, it looks like I did a wing, right? Looks okay. Watch when I close my eyes. You'll see all of a sudden there's all kinds of area that's missing the black. So, you see? The black only goes up to here. That whole area there is missing. Why? Because that's my hood. When I close my eyes, this whole area of the lid comes over and hides my lid. You see? So it makes working with hooded eyes very difficult. So what women with hooded eyes then have to do is, you know, you do as with your eyes open, but then you have to fill in the areas like this. And you'll see I'll be doing like a little, like a whale tail. It'll look like a whale tail on the back of the car when I have my eyes open. But let's continue actually with what he said. Very, very good point. And I'm having this argument and I didn't even want to have this argument. I posted a joke meme. And the only reason I posted the meme is because I was looking for a different picture and I came across this and I said, haha, I haven't posted this in a while. And libertarians lost their freaking mind. It was a joke. It was my minarchy, frenemy of the state meme, and people lost their minds. When have they ever known me to be nasty to minarchists or to be the type of person who says minarchists aren't libertarians? I don't hardly say anybody's not a libertarian. Why would you take that, knowing me and the context, as offensive rather than as a joke? But in fact, I actually think that's not even offensive if I was an offensive person. To say a minarchist is a frenemy of the state admits that the minarchist realizes the state is something that can be very, very, very dangerous, and that the alliance with a state is an uneasy one, that they remember that they are also an enemy. I actually don't think that meme is insulting at all to minarchists. I think it's accurate and responsible. But besides that, this turned into a huge anarchy v minarchy debate, which is, I had no interest in debating. It was a meme. People, learn what memes are for. But what Michael Malice just described happens all the time. These assertions are just made, and then when you counter them, it's, you might as well not have said anything. It's like you just spat into the wind. You know, oh, if you don't have an organized military, you're going to immediately be invaded and conquered. Yeah? Is that what happened with Sweden? Is that what happens with Niue? Niue is an island that's off the coast of New Zealand that I'm obsessed with because I think it could become Libertopia. Rather than doing the Free State Project, I think all of us should move our asses down to Niue. Look into it. But they don't have any standing defense. New Zealand defends them. Now we could argue about whether or not that's desirable or not, but at least the point has immediately, that if you say it's inevitable that a small anarchist area would immediately be overrun because they don't have a standing army, all anyone has to do is give you an example of a small area that has no standing army that isn't overrun. And that's just proving your point. You can then expand upon your point, but you can't act as if at least your initial assertion wasn't disproven. And so I don't debate this topic very much with the type of people who want to debate it. The type of people who want to debate this usually are horrible debaters and do stuff like that. The people who are really nuanced and understand the issue and wouldn't make a dumb argument like that, they're not interested in debating it. They're like just cool. They're like, cool, I just disagree. You're an anarchist, I'm not, kind of thing. But let's continue. And while this is going, I am going to put the whale tail on my eye. Next scene. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's just a lot of, in the same sense as the example before, when people go, well, if you really pick at it, what you're taking as a given is that the state is there protecting you. But that's a big jump to just take that as a given. And what you're taking as a given here is that the military is actually there to thwart off invaders. But this isn't really, I mean, I'm not suggesting that never in history has a military been used to do that, but it's not as if this is something that's happening with regular occurrence.
Right.
That militaries are just, fighting off invading forces. I mean, like, there certainly are a lot of examples of states invading other states. But the truth is that it's not exactly clear that a centralized government does a better job at repelling these invasions. I mean, look, Afghanistan isn't even really a country.
Right.
We just think of them as a country, but most people in Afghanistan don't think of themselves as a nation. They think of themselves as whatever tribe, whatever little sect they're a part of. They don't think of themselves as all, some random warlord in Afghanistan doesn't think of himself as under one nation with the Taliban. And they've withstood 20 years of us invading them, and we're about to hopefully leave in defeat, whether we admit it or not. It's not clear at all. On the other hand, France in the Second World War was a very strong centralized state, and they just freaking went down like that when the Nazis invaded. So I mean, it's one of these things that's asserted but not really thought through. that,
But
whatever.
And also, if you're going to make the argument, well, if someone's providing security for you, then therefore they're de facto your government. It's like, if someone's my chauffeur or my bodyguard, they're not my president, and no one thinks they're my president. So it's just I'm trying to understand their perspective on this, and I'm falling short, to be honest.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll keep trying. Maybe we'll bring one of them on to debate us on this at some point.
But I don't even need a debate. I don't even understand.
Just
want
to
to
know what the argument actually is.
If you're saying that a small area would immediately be conquered, and I'm giving you examples that are counter examples to what you're claiming, and you're still maintaining your position, I don't know where to go from here.
Okay, so you can... Whoop, dropped my glass. So you can see how I fixed the whale tail. So if you ever see anyone whose eyeliner does a weird thing like that, that's because they have hooded eyes. And hello, Julian. Though I don't like using liquid eyeliner for this. It kind of like it's a little skippy and sketchy, but whatever. Yeah, I thought all of those were excellent points that they made. Yeah, I want to see comments. Let me find here. I want to continue. Ooh, I moved something I shouldn't have. How did that happen? Have you ever had your mouse grab something and then not let go? My mouse won't let go of this. Maybe if I hit escape? Yeah, my mouse has grabbed something and it won't let go. Let go! Maybe, wow. Let me try hitting my trackpad. Yeah, my trackpad will do it. That is so weird. But anyway, let's put this up on the screen. If the United States would keep its nose out of other countries' affairs, there's a good probability the rest of the world would not have such an interest in attacking us. True. I really liked his example of Afghanistan, because not that I want to say or compare, Ancapistan to Afghanistan, but the fact is, they're not really they're a country only in the very loosest sense of the word. They probably don't consider themselves that, and yet they've kicked our ass in a way. I mean, we should be pulling out. There certainly hasn't been victory. So this idea that a small anarchist area, which by definition would be heavily armed and very oppositional, would just be conquered, is also it's just assumed without evidence. In fact, guerrilla warfare is very difficult to conquer. Now I want to put in my whale tail here on this side. And then this little pink thing I was holding up before is a fan I used to dry so that it doesn't, get all icky. Next clip.
Yeah.
And if you're going to argue that, okay, anarchism can't work on an America-sized scale, okay, fine, I don't care. So we'll have Vermont. What is that? What relevance is that?
Yeah. And of course, it's just even the argument that
I like that. Sorry, just saying. If I'm going to be free, I have to live in a giant country. Is that what they're saying? It seems very weird.
Well, it's funny, man, because this is something that we deal with all the time as anarchists, but there is a tremendous bias toward the status quo.
Sure.
It's just one of the so people, particularly in America, really do have this feeling that we've got to be a giant big country. I mean, because we're a giant big country, and how could we not be? I mean, what if we were just like a smaller country? Then we're not America anymore. Then it's not this thing.
Okay. Okay, you got me now. Yeah, sorry about that. I hit a wrong button. Burp. My problem. So let me continue. They somewhat downplayed something that I wish that they didn't, where, it is true that in talking with people, they automatically assume that, like, Ancapistan or Libertopia would immediately take the same exact geographic area as occupied by the United States now. And they rightly say that that's just not possible. I think we're starting to prove it's not possible for us to have this Franken system we have now in this large area. I do think it's inevitable, unfortunately, but I hope it's peaceful, that the U.S. is going to break into smaller areas. The fear on it, it's not going to be peaceful. Very rarely is. But we should know that as libertarians because it's too centrally planned. But I think they somewhat downplayed the reason for this, as if the people are just enamored with bigness for bigness's sake, and that's not it. I think they downplayed the importance of a national identity, because immediately what these folks are thinking is, I'm an American. These are other Americans. You're saying that I wouldn't be able to be with my other Americans anymore and they'd be something different. But they're Americans. We're a family. And I don't think they properly took into perspective here in this argument the there is good tribalism, the sense of kinship they feel with fellow countrymen, that your reality when you're saying to them, yes, in my perfect world we would be split up into smaller chunks, what they're hearing and feeling is, you want to break up my family. And I think we do wrong to downplay that.
Is the Republican Party worth trying to save? As in, would minarchists be better trying to infect the Republican Party? I am not in a position to advise minarchists or Republicans. I don't know what you mean by worth. If you mean is the Republican Party a vehicle to get people elected, that's indisputable. I don't think any party inherently has any ideas or identity. There's no reason anyone can't run as anything. It's just a branding thing. So not too long ago, the boomers seemed to think it's of interest to point out the Democratic Party was the party of segregation. Now they're the party of virulent anti-racism. It doesn't matter. They can do whatever they want. That's what parties are. They don't really have an identity.
Okay.
Just like caviar used to be for poor people, now it's the food for the wealthy, right?
Okay, absolutely disagree with him there. And I think he might be somewhat ignorant of some facts, at least as far as the LP is concerned, because he's not, as far as I know, he's not like an LP member, and he's not really like into all of that the way Dave is. In a way, I agree with him that the two major parties have just been vessels to be filled with whatever random idea of the people who happen to rise to power in those parties happen to be. And the fact that the Democrats used to be the party of slavery is pretty irrelevant to what they are now. You know, that I never found that argument particularly persuasive. I found it historically interesting, but not particularly persuasive. But I absolutely disagree with them that it's inevitable or just obvious that a party isn't anything in and of itself. I think you can set up a party to be something of itself, in and of itself, to actually not be a mere container to be filled. And that's what the LP has done with the statement of principles, which I don't know if he's aware of, which is basically a self-destruct mechanism. Now, he could say, well, yeah, that's words on paper and people can ignore it. Yeah. But I do think the fact that it is imploded in there as a self-destruct depth charge would, in fact, if that continued to be done, to be ignored, that the party would self-destruct. That's the whole purpose of it. So I don't know, and I'm sure we're not the only very ideological party that has put safeguards into place. So I think he's correct when it comes to the two major parties, but I don't think he knows what he's talking about when it comes to the LP, to be honest with you. And this was Michael on his own show, this clip. But while we are talking about Michael Malice, whom I adore and who still will not follow me on Twitter. And me bitching about it just means that he will never follow me on Twitter, just out of the sheer perversity of it, because that's how Michael Malice is, and he's adorable. I love him. I want to talk about his new book that just came out, and did it go to #1? It came close to #1 on Amazon, self-published, excuse me, got a little wet there, with a title of The Anarchist Handbook. I mean, that's incredible. You know, maybe the world's a bit more ready than we think it is, huh? I haven't read it yet. It's still a virgin book, so Michael, I'm going to be taking your virginity, baby. I haven't even cracked it open. But I do have something to disagree with on the back. It might be picking nits a bit, and I said this last night in a live stream, to nitpick on a blurb on the back, but I'm going to anyway. Why the hell not? I'm a libertarian. We nitpick. So it says, it's from the introduction, so these are actually, I guess, Michael's words. Anarchism has been both a vision of a peaceful cooperative society, yay, and an ideology of revolutionary terror. Boo. Correct. And people today tend to think of it as the latter and not the former. Since the term itself, anarchism, is a negation, very, very important point, there is a great deal of disagreement on what the positive alternative would look like, which is why I call myself a libertarian anarchist. It says the Anarchist Handbook is an opportunity for all these many varied voices to speak for themselves from across the decades. These were human beings who saw things differently from their fellow men. They fought and they loved. They lived and they died. They disagreed on much, but they all shared one vision: freedom. That last sentence I have a huge problem with. Is it true? Yeah, but on a very superficial way. Because that word freedom means something different to each of these varied things. They might all call what they're doing freedom, but you know, what is it that, what was it in Humpty Dumpty? It's like, you know, Humpty said, or was it the cat? One of the characters in Alice in Wonderland said, you know, when I say a word, it means precisely what I choose for it to mean, and nothing more. And Alice says, but the question is whether one word can mean so many different things. That is the problem here. To say they all believed in freedom, from my perspective, let me turn that on its head. What one anarchist may call freedom, I would call bondage. So I don't even think you can do that as the unifying thing without a lot of qualification. I think they all shared one vision: a world without political rulers. I think that's about all you can say of a vision that they shared. To just say, and maybe say, which they would call freedom or something. But to say we share one vision, freedom, makes it sound like our vision of freedom is the same. And it's not. Because that all goes into, how do you define aggression? Well, you can't define aggression unless you first define property rights. And isn't that the big issue in actual contention amongst a lot of these different anarchist thoughts? They are all internally consistent, but that doesn't make them externally consistent with other versions of anarchism. The only thing we all agree upon is no unchosen rulers. Because some would even say no rulers at all, chosen or not, the ones who don't believe in any hierarchy. That's not me. But I think one thing we could all agree on is no unchosen rulers. That's the minimum. And we would call that freedom. But what that entails is so different that I think this overly simplified it. And I think that's why most anarchists of a certain stripe tend to only write within that stripe, because otherwise there's hardly any meat to cling on to. But I think what Michael's point of this book is to at least get people to question the necessity of the state. And in that, he's going to be a life changer. And Let me see, did that thing let go? Yes, it did. So I want to add this to the broadcast. Bill says, both of the major parties are Federalists. The LP is what could be considered an anti-Federalist party. I would agree with that, I believe. Okay, I think I've only got one clip left. I always have Mr. Ben Shapiro. He always finds something that I need to talk about. So let me cue him up, and I'm going to stick on my lipstick, and I'm almost ready to go because I'm only going to storage. So this isn't a particularly fancy look. I'm going to be putting on some mascara, and yeah.
Okay, so this is what they're looking for. What they're looking for is a complete overthrow of certain legislative areas of American life. So important to note that the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which did a lot of very good things, also completely shifted the relationship between the government and the individual. For example, it completely did away with freedom of association. It actually extended into the private sphere in some pretty negative ways with long-term externalities. Christopher Caldwell discusses this in his book, The Age of Entitlement. It was really a ground shift in how America saw the role of government.
Okay, why didn't that go to the next scene? Here we go. Yeah, I thought that was a very excellent point to make. That libertarians today, I don't like it when Ben Shapiro is braver than us. We don't like to admit that in a lot of respects, that second Civil Rights Act was bad. Just because you call it a nice name, civil rights, and use the word rights, doesn't make it rights. Just like calling something intellectual property doesn't make it property. But, you know, half the battle is in words, isn't it? Because who wants to be against rights, and what libertarian wants to be against property? But that begs the question that it is rights and that it is property. All of the civil rights laws that made it illegal for the government to discriminate were wonderful. The minute they intruded into private life, private business, that was a complete turning on its head of the role of government. And libertarians should be appalled at it. I think that was the last clip, but I want to see if I had another one from Ben, because it seems to me I thought he said one other thing on this topic that I clipped out. So let me look. Nope, that was it, in fact. Okay. Well, guys, I am going to be heading off to storage right here. As some of you know, I quit my job without having another one yet. I might as well put my makeup on a little bit while we're talking here, and I want to give points. I want to give time if anyone has any other points out of everything we discussed that they want to bring up. So let me just put on my lipstick, talk a little, put on my lipstick, and if nothing else comes up, we will go. Some lip liner. Yeah, so I quit my job without having another one because I just couldn't take it anymore. So I am actively looking. I put out a couple more applications today. But in the meantime, you can help me out. But this is something I wanted to do anyway. I'm trying to do Liberty stuff more full time. Here's my Patreon, if you can. And I realize not everyone can. Please consider supporting this channel. It would mean a great deal to me, and it would let me do more content. I'm finding, as I'm finding my niche, that I am doing content, it's not duplicative of what's already out there. So I do think my voice is needed, a female libertarian, kind of quirky voice. I do, but strong, radical. Not that there aren't others, but I think I do come at it from a different viewpoint. One, from an anarchist viewpoint, but also from a viewpoint of being very solidly within the Libertarian Party. So it's very libertarian-centric as well. And the history thing certainly is not something anyone else is doing. So please, if you can, right there, it would make me very, very happy, particularly in right now, because I'm scared shitless. Just putting on a little lipstick. So there we go. That's kind of my not terribly made up face. It's probably more than most people do for their minimal, but you know, I'm a bit extra on everything I do. And I'm going to go work at storage now, getting ready for an LNC meeting. because there's some questions I need to answer in my historical report. It doesn't look like there is any further questions. So I would like to just give a little acknowledgement here to my current patrons. And you can see there's some names on there, like Tom Woods. Thank you so much. It blew my world away when Tom Woods and Stefan Kinsella, two libertarians that have influenced me so greatly, became patrons of my show. Stefan Kinsella is actually one of the libertarians that pushed me into anarchism without even knowing it. His article that is entitled something to the effect of, this is close but not exact, The Irrelevance of the Moral Impossibility of Anarcho-Libertarianism, really, really, like, connected the dots for me. So I owe a great debt to Stefan, and I was very pleased to have met him in person. But everyone on that list, thank you so much. And for those of you who can't, those of you who just listen, thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome day, and I will be streaming later, I think, and I'll let you know. Have an awesome day. Mi guapas de libertad.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.